Welcome to Season 4 of the NAC4 Business Podcast.
Nice to see everyone today, and great to see that we've got a very diverse geography of attendees. Bernie and I actually met, funny enough, through a networking group that I belong to and Bernie's connected with in Glasgow, Scotland. It just shows that during the pandemic, there was so many ways that we could connect. So our mutual friend, Willie Nicol, an ex-policeman in Scotland, who's now a personal growth coach, is the one who connected Bernie and I, even though I live in Toronto and Bernie lives in Ottawa. So it just shows the power of networking. So thanks so much for inviting me to speak today. I've got some ideas I'd like to share with you from some of my own personal experiences with professional networking, and looking forward to any questions that you have. I think we'll make active use of the chat today. I help newcomers to Canada and small business owners with improving their business development skills and really strengthening them, because a lot of them have had experience selling, but not necessarily in the Canadian environment. So to begin, I'd like to actually have you close your eyes for a sec and just think for a moment back 6 years ago this week. Think a bit about what you were doing the second week of March, beginning of the second week of March of 2020. And think a bit about your financial portfolio at that time. Think about the stocks and investments that you had, where you had to put your money, what kind of industries you were invested in, and just consider that for a minute. Okay, so open your eyes. So if you were like me, you probably had your money in what I would call some of the beach stocks. So those were booking systems and eating organizations like restaurants. You may have had them in accommodations, cruises, hotels. Well, everyone knows what happened on Friday the 13th of that week. We went into lockdown. The stock market dived, especially for all those industries and sectors for the next several years. And it just shows the unpredictability and not knowing the future. So part of my thought process today is to share with you around some of the benefits of diversifying your portfolio, not your financial portfolio, but your professional network portfolio, and how important that is, that you're thinking not just this week and what you need for your business, but where you want your career to be in 5 years, and whether your professional network will help you get to where you want to go in 5 years. So with that said, we're going to talk about chatting with strangers and how diversifying your professional network can help you grow your business. So some of the things that we're going to talk about are discovering your ecosystem in terms of where you're networking today and where you might consider networking. Some secrets that I've learned from effective networkers, especially during my 7 years as the key account manager at the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. Some tips on raising your visibility at in-person events. And I also have at the end a special volunteer opportunity for you that those of you in Ontario might be able to benefit from. So what is networking? This is something that I think we've got a very experienced group on the call, but when I'm sharing with newcomers to Canada, it's really our organized approach to building professional relationships. One of the key things is there is not a timeline, even though it's reciprocal. So it's not a transactional approach. It's really around building relationships, and it is a lifelong skill. So whether you have your own business, you're changing careers, even for young people, the ability to develop professional relationships is very important. So as I've learned from personal experience, networking can assist with many of the priorities, whether it's starting your own business, as I did about a year ago, growing your existing business, finding customers and suppliers. Interestingly, I found a couple of suppliers of mine in this group in Scotland that I'm a member of. So it's a great way to find employees and collaborators, especially ones to do podcasts with, as I found. Researching new markets and raising your profile with stakeholders. So it's all around business development strategy. So networking is a component of how you develop your business. So what I'd like you to do now is to put your answer to this question into the chat. So the question is, What occupations do you think are the most effective at professional networking? And I won't give you the answers here. My answers, but you can put down which you found makes the most sense. Okay, so let's look at some of the answers people gave. Sales and marketing, comedians. Oh, there we go. That's a good one. Sales. Any other suggestions? HR. Yes. The people, of course, recruiters. Hungry people. Yes. Hungry for business. Yes. So what I found, just in my time with the chamber, is some of the most effective networkers have come from um, several different areas. So these are some of the events that I've attended. A lot of it was with roundtables with government ministers and different stakeholders. And the people that I found really effective in these situations, all cases, were people who were involved in real estate, people in financial services, and people in public affairs. So public affairs, we may think them as lobbyists, but a lot of cases are involved with stakeholder relations or community relations. If I was in a room with real estate agents and maybe people from like the Ontario Real Estate Association, people from financial services, whether they were self-employed or in insurance or banking, they were all very much involved with developing professional relationships. So, what did these folks have in common? In a lot of cases, they were very visible, they were active in the events that we were participating in. They achieved consistency in terms of if we were hosting an event for a minister, they'd be sure to be there. They were always engaged, had follow up questions, they held themselves accountable, and overall, they were really generous. So, it wasn't a case of they were there to pitch or to sell, but they were to help or provide assistance. In a lot of cases, you would find it in the sessions that we had where there was advisory sessions with government. In a lot of cases, they were there pointing out the unanticipated consequences of government policy, but doing it in a way that was seen as very helpful. So I have asked them for some of their own tips and suggestions on what they would suggest to people who are either just learning networking or wanting to improve it. So number one was, of course, when you're going to an event, never sit or stand with people you know. It just makes things way too easy for you to lean on the people that you already know. You also, in terms of your body language, may be in a situation where you're closing off the discussion to other people to join. Follow up within 24 hours. If you want to be memorable, you need to be able to follow up, send out a message. In a lot of cases, maybe you'll have a message that's developed in advance, but make sure that you do, or else you risk being forgotten. Have a call to action when speaking with someone. Now, the call to action may be something as simple as, "Hey, I'm going to be going on a podcast. You might want to listen." It may be, "I'm going to another event. Would you like to come to join? I can send you an invitation to the event." But something that where you're adding value. Don't be afraid of meeting strangers, and strangers can be in people that are not people that you're used to dealing with. It could be if you're self-employed, speaking with people who are working in a large organization or a different type of sector or a different industry. One thing that I coach on is never make an ask of a new contact right away. It's very similar to if you were to meet up with someone you had just met at a dinner party. You might make a 5 cent ask, but not a $5,000 ask. So the example, a difference would be a 5 cent ask would be, "Hey, do you know of a good moving company that I could use because I'm moving next week?" The $5,000 ask would be, "Hey, I've just met you. Would you happen to have a pickup truck? We could really use an F-150 to move my apartment next week." That's not something you would ask of someone. It's really treating these relationships as if you were making deposits into a bank account. And of course, you'd never make a withdrawal from a bank account until you had made a lot of deposits. And the deposits are being able to build the relationships. Making sure that you engage meaningful with new contacts by offering some of your advice and making sure that there's opportunities for everyone to have their voice heard. So you don't want to dominate the discussions. You want to make sure that other people are brought into the conversations. So I'm going to ask if you could put some Ideas of where are you finding your network? Where are you finding people to connect with? So, of course, you can put in the group that we've joined today, but other suggestions. Where are you finding new people to add to your network? Referrals from existing clients, LinkedIn, in-person events, referral partners, conferences, LinkedIn, like I said, hobby groups, kids play date groups. Yes, I remember those days quite well. Trade Winds, Phoenix Business Exchange, Grant Exchange, and the Hive. Perfect. And from guests on the podcast, referral partners, virtual events, live groups, all great sources of information. So let me give some other suggestions on other places that we might find people. So these are some other ideas. So chambers of commerce and boards of trade. I was involved in the chamber world for 7 years. In Ontario, there's actually 150 chambers of commerce and boards of trade. There are also chambers of commerce around the world. The World Chambers Congress happens every 2 years, and it's actually kind of the Olympics of the chamber world. There are going to be representatives from about 120 countries coming to Toronto next year for the event. The event was held last year in Melbourne, Australia, and for the benefit of Francis, it was actually held in Geneva, Switzerland in 2023. There's also business improvement areas, community groups, conferences, conventions, trade shows, which is an area that I'm actually doing more work with my clients on. Networking clubs, such as the one we just were part of. But there's also other networking groups. There's networking groups for newcomers, both to Canada in the United States. There are networking groups. I'm part of a group that's um, designed for newcomers to the Netherlands, as well as in Scotland. There are referral groups, co-working space, as you'd mentioned. There's also small business training sessions that are run by municipalities or city governments. Post-secondary institutions run open houses, conferences, events. So we're talking about colleges, universities, of course, alumni associations, trade associations. There is a trade and professional association. It's where for virtually every occupation or industry that you can imagine, and even ones that you haven't even thought of. There's also buying groups and advocacy organizations. So there's a lot of different places that potentially you can look to and may not have considered to date. How to build your visibility and impact. So some of these organizations I've mentioned have presentations by local businesses. A lot of the chambers of commerce and boards of trade have what they call before eights or after fives, which are networking groups. The mayor's breakfasts are usually well attended. There's all kinds of sponsorship and speaking opportunities that are available. Each of them also have an award gala. It's a big fundraiser, of course, for the chamber world. The Ontario Chamber, which I was part of, decided to move to an online television production because of the events from 6 years ago this week. And actually, it's continuing as a TV production. But most of the local chambers have award events and there's speaking opportunities. There's access to political leaders, there's policy and administration committees and board work, all chances for you as a small business owner to raise the profile, give value back to your community, and build visibility and credibility with stakeholders in the community. So, if I was to make some suggestions on raising your visibility and credibility, there are 3 areas of suggestions that I would make. The first one is mindset. And the mindset is really around curiosity about the other people, not just the other people in the room, but the other people who are not in the room that the people in the room know. So part of this comes back to don't judge a book by its cover. One thing that I've learned solidly is that you'd never know who the person was that you've met. You don't know who they know. You also don't know who they may become. So a lot of people I met who kind of fall into the kind of error of here's the people in the room and I don't see my customer in the room. I don't see a potential supplier in the room. This isn't for me and it's not something worth pursuing. But what you don't know is who the people in the room also know. Assuming even today, each of us probably know several hundred, if not thousands of people. And you're not just meeting the individuals in the room today, but you're also meeting the people that they know. And don't make assumptions about that. A lot of the focus needs to be on how you can help the people in the room. Yes, it's a selling opportunity, but in a lot of cases, you really need to build that relationship and trust before the people will even consider you as a supplier. So, what can you do to help them out? In a lot of cases, I suggest to my clients that they try to find minimum three people at each event that they're able to assist. Be prepared. So we talked a bit about this earlier around business cards and optimized LinkedIn profiles. Those are really table stakes for any conversations that you're going to have coming up. Another kind of tip would be to have a thoughtful question to ask a panelist. I recall an immigrants and tech event that was held at the Royal Ontario Museum a couple months ago. So I attended, and there was a session with a number of tech entrepreneurs. There was someone from Vancouver, Calgary, there was someone from Toronto on stage. I asked a question and actually had people come up after the event and give me their business card because in asking the question, I gave like a 10-second ad on what I did, but I was able to connect with many more people in that room because they knew who I was and what I was interested in because I asked the question. And I've done that a number of times where you are likely, you may be afraid about asking a question, but in a lot of cases, if you've got the question, the odds are 80% of the other people in the room probably also want to ask the same question. So that's another way to, again, raise visibility, credibility, and potentially meet new people. I'd also suggest like the 20-second and 60-second introductions, similar to what we're doing today on our call. But that's something to have available, but I wouldn't necessarily use this as a pitch. Again, you're there to help the people out as opposed to there to sell. Because and you're considering people who are actually not in the room. And the third tip is around being a generous networker. So part of it is having a follow-up strategy within 24 hours, recalling your conversation, similar to going back to remembering people's names, and then immediately finding a way to add value. It could be somebody that you're connecting them with, bring them news of interest. It just shows that you were thoughtful and you remember something about what they were looking for. So these are a few words of wisdom about networking that I live by. I think the one that really works most for me is from that great Tom Cruise movie from 1996, Jerry Maguire. There's so many great quotes in there, like to business, but the one where he's in a conversation with Cuba Gooding Jr. and Cuba Gooding's asking for a raise as a wide receiver with the Phoenix Cardinals, and he's asking Jerry to show him the money, and Jerry comes back and really says to him, you know, help me help you. Uh, the more that people know what you're looking for and how you can help them, the more people are going to be willing to and able to help you out. So that's kind of a summary of some of the tips I want. There's a couple I wanted to share with you. One of the first things you would want to ask, instead of saying, what do you do? Tell me about your business, is more indirect. At least this is in a Canadian business environment or Toronto. So, it's different in other parts of Canada, but it's like, how do you know the organizers? How did you find out about this event? What brings you here today? So you just want to have a relaxed conversation with people, and it's not that you're there to pitch because when people are in pitch mode, and again, there might be differing opinions on this. I think that in some ways that pushes people away. There's a time for pitching. I've got a background in sales, but there's a time also just to build a relationship and find out about the people. And I think that's kind of what you want to lead. I'll share with you about a networking event I went to. So it was a speed networking event. So there were some elements I'd probably repeat, and there's some elements that maybe I would add to. So they actually had people sit across from each other. There were about 20 of us, 10 on each side. And then they had a host who basically would have people the right side of the table, you talked for 2 minutes, people got up and high-fived and then sat down. The other people talked for 2 minutes, they rang the bell, you moved a seat to the left, and you got to do it all over again. So I met a lot of people. It also depends on how big the room is and how many people you've got, because we had about just the right number. And, people could hear each other because they were across the tables. That format worked for that size of room and that number of attendees. Look, I've got all my badges here, but it's helpful, right? And then I know that people also will, handwrite, they'll give you a marker and they'll say like, handwrite your, but sometimes it's hard to read. And you stick it on your coat, or for some women who are wearing like a dress, it's really not conducive. It tends to fall off. That's not helpful. So then if you know, you have a lanyard. Lanyards are professional. I have one like here. These ones actually hang nicely and they're big enough and you can read. So if you're running an event, maybe invest a bit more, be prepared in terms of people confirming in advance, and have something where you can read the name and what a little bit about them. This one even had barcodes on. So again, this is a huge conference, but some of those tips would help circulate people. And I think also scattering within the event some speakers. So it's almost like a natural excuse where we're going to network for 15, have a speaker. It gives people an excuse to go to the bar or the food station, and it naturally will have people circulate more. So just please connect with me on LinkedIn if we're not already connected. And here we go. So one thing I'm actually doing is coaching small business people with attending conferences, trade shows, and conventions. And this is at the PDAC conference actually from last year. But if you're interested in completing a self-assessment survey, please contact me on LinkedIn and I'm happy to share it with you. The second opportunity, this is be for the folks in Toronto. I'm actually part of the Ontario Career Lab. So this is uh, a volunteer coaching organization that has been set up by the Halton Industry Economic Council, and they are in conjunction with the Province of Ontario's Ministry of Education, conducting coaching sessions with grade 9 and 10 students across the province. So the goal is to reach 310,000 high school students to have informal career conversations during school hours, and they're looking for coaches, and the coaches just need to be adults from any occupation, profession. And what happens is that the organizing group coordinates with the high schools. On average, we'll get like about 140 students come out and about 20 coaches. And during the course of an hour or two, the coaches take turns with small groups of students, 6 or 8 at a time, explaining about their occupation and career journey. And for most of us, it's fairly circuitous and not necessarily ending up where we thought we would. But it's important for the students, especially at those ages, to learn about that and learn about different occupations, because in most cases they probably know what their parents may have done or their relatives or close friends. So if you're interested in that, again, this is for the province of Ontario. Please let me know. There is fairly simple registration process, and there's also, of course, a vetting process. But I'm happy to share more details with you.
To reach the podcast hosts, email them at info@creativeinsight.com or by the website creativeinsight.com, spelled KREATIVISIGHT.com. To reach Wayne at his email, wayne@motive8u.ca, that is MOTIVE, the numeral 8 and the letter U.ca, or his website, motive8u.ca. If you would like to be a guest on this podcast and share your knowledge, let us know. We would also appreciate your feedback on the content or format. Check the show notes for more details. For these podcasts, we like to acknowledge the support and thanks to the following people. Carl Richards from Podcast Solutions Made Simple, a renowned podcast expert. Fred Crouch, who is the Property Wizard podcaster, where Bernie is a co-host. Jovan Strika from At Hive, a co-working space that is more than just a space. Then Melanie Weber, Bernie's invaluable business partner, and Wayne Pratt from Motive8U Inc., who serves as both a coach and co-host of these podcasts. Disclaimer. Please note that the NAC4 Business Podcast episodes are meant solely for educational and general informational purposes. The information and opinions contained within are not intended to be professional advice on any subject matter. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed by the participants are their own personal beliefs and do not represent the views of the podcast hosts or any affiliated organizations. It is important to note that this podcast is not a replacement for consulting with certified experts in your area who possess knowledge of your unique situation. The hosts of the podcast, along with any participants or affiliated groups, do not take responsibility for any actions taken or not taken based on the information presented in this episode. It is highly recommended that individuals seek guidance from their own personal advisors in fields such as accounting, law, or other pertinent areas prior to undertaking any actions or making decisions that may impact their financial, legal, or other aspects of life.